As we finished our discussion in chapter 16, we can think about, we can recognize that we're all going to experience bad times. That's just part of life. You know, we are going to lose some of the people that we love. We are going to have people that we love betray us. We or people we love are going to become ill or hurt in some way. And what I want you to think about here is that even during these difficult times, we can grow. We can find some way to continue. So in chapter 14, you saw a discussion of post-traumatic stress disorder. And what a number of people have argued since then is that in addition to symptoms as a result of PTSD, we can also experience some growth, that we can actually do better after a trauma. And what we may experience are some perceptual changes, that we see ourselves differently as a result of that trauma. You know, maybe we're seeing ourselves as a survivor rather than a victim. Perhaps we're able to identify our strengths as a result of the trauma. You know, see the ways, you know, that you were able to even get through this very difficult time. Perhaps you're seeing yourself as in some ways less likely to be, you know, to be damaged by things because you got through this difficult time. You may experience some changes in relationships that as a result of this difficult time, maybe maybe you're valuing your relationships more and more committed to them, and identify who's really there for you and who isn't there. Now, finally, we may stop and say that one of the things that we are doing in life, or that we're seeing our priorities, our values, our goals differently. You know, that maybe before this difficult time, you said, you know, I want a job that's going to earn me a lot of money. And now you're saying, I want a job that's going to fulfill me. I want to know that I'm making a difference in life. I want to be able to spend time with the people who really make a difference, you know, who are really important to me. Now, as we're talking about these things, you can certainly see how some of these ideas are very consistent with what Abraham Maslow talked about the self-actualizing person being like. Or that you might see it as similar to this, you know, authentic, congruent person that Carl Rogers talked about. You know, that we are finding, rather than being damaged and by what happened, that we're coming together and finding a way to be our true self. In order to cultivate resilience, I think we can, you know, foster connections with our family members and our friends, you know, with members of the community. We can find ways to challenge our catastrophizing about what happened. Again, go back to chapter 4 and think about some of the ways that your thinking can be either helpful or not so helpful. Many of us don't like change, and yet change is part of life. And so finding ways to accept that change can be very helpful, to move toward our goals. So it may be helpful to be thinking about what your goals are and to begin taking steps towards them. To use problems focused coping when possible. To look for for opportunities for self-discovery. To build a positive view of self and keep events in perspective. To be hopeful and to engage in regular self-care. So making sure that you have time with your family, with your friends, with doing the things that you enjoy doing. I think it's not just us, but we also want to be thinking about how can we build institutions that are going to promote the best of us. And I think those institutions, schools, universities, businesses, churches, are those, those really positive institutions, are those where the people in them have a sense of purpose, engage fairly with a sense of humanity. So actually seeing the person as a person rather than as an object. These are places that feel safe to be yourself, allow you to be congruent, and that treat people with dignity. Now, again, these may be businesses, schools, universities, churches. They may be families. They may be neighborhoods. And so how can you build these things in your life? If you're an RA here, how can you, or a CA, how can you build some of these things into your work there? If you're working in a group home, how can you build these ideals into that work environment? If you're working at McDonald's, how can you build that in? So let's think about some of these ideas from a critical thinking model. Certainly, we want to be thinking about what our values are and how are those values things that we can bring out and act on in our lives. We want to be thinking about some of the claims that we receive about influences. Sometimes as you're reading magazines or reading an advertisement, it sounds like the way to happiness is through getting more money, more things. The evidence doesn't support that conclusion. And so make sure that you're looking at multiple explanations for what you're seeing. Thinking about the roles of context and culture. So how do those influence how you're seeing things? And then as you are relating to other people, think about how to apply these ideas in your interactions with them. How can you behave in an intimate and supportive, authentic way with the people that you're working with? How can you foster a sense of justice and optimism and hope? How can you see the people around you as people rather than as objects? And take care.